Hey everyone, my name is Buster Green. I am an anime YouTuber, and if I could currently get 935 additional watch hours ASAP, I will get monetized. Oh wait, actually now it's only 922. Anyway, please just watch my stuff for an hour today. It really helps out the channel, and once I'm monetized, I'll start making a lot cooler stuff. If you're new to the channel, in my last big video, I covered the complete story of Kamen Rider Black actor Tetsuro Kurata, who, when suddenly faced with hardship during the 2019 pandemic, committed several white-collar crimes before ultimately extorting his fanbase for about $3,000 that we have record of, and then promptly kind of acted like a sad bitch about it, never really owned up to it, and was ultimately punished with an internet cancellation and revocation of reprising his role in the remake Kamen Rider Black Sun, which ironically probably would have solved all of his financial problems and definitely paid him more than $3,000. Anyway, I guess in short, he's dealing with a lot and not dealing with it well. If you want more information on that, check out that video. But anyway, after that video, everyone kept telling me at least he wasn't as bad as Super 1. So that raises the question, well, what the fuck did Super 1 do? And I guess now we're gonna have to talk about Super 1, because that seems like the right thing to do now. Now, I have a strong appreciation for the dangerous and groundbreaking original Showa Kamen Rider series. The way it straddled these themes of fascism, religion, persecution, corruption, the government, the loss of humanities, and somehow managed to combine it all with straight up monster horror. Also, I still a lot of times appreciate Showa Kamen Riders more than I appreciate New Millennium Kamen Riders, because seeing a real man in a bug suit dodge real explosives and jump out real windows and punch real Nazis is a lot more interesting than seeing like a not that all convincing CGI model try to like play with giant trading cards and Pac-Man machines and you know what it's like. The Showa Riders just typically put a lot more effort into their shows and do a lot more with a lot less, and they have a lot more heart because they have to make something completely new with the best technology that the 1970s can offer, whereas the modern series is just all CGI and fucking like cash grab games. Anyway, despite that, I categorize the Showa Riders into two major groups. First off, we have the Golden Age Showa Riders. These consist of the riders from 1971 to 1975. Ichigo, Nigo, V3, Riderman, Kamen Rider X, Amazon, and finally Stronger, and maybe Tackle if you count her because she's a girl. And then after that we have the Dark Age Showa Riders, who have a different vibe to them. They consist of Sky Rider, Super 1, ZX, and Black. Although if I'm being really real with you guys, I typically prefer to include Black with the early Heisei Riders because its tone and its cinematography is the same as the other Heisei Riders. So with Black excluded, the only Dark Age Showa Rider I've actually seen is ZX, and he's got this fucking hot, sexy disco theme song called Dragon Road. It's by Akira Kushida. You might know him from Dragon Ball Super. He just did the Ultra Instinct song. Anyway, if you like that song, you're gonna like this song. It's a fucking jam. It's about him going down the Dragon Road, punching guys. It's a good song. But sick theme song aside, ZX kind of looks like a hot mess. He's like green and orange, and he doesn't really stand out or do anything special. And he only exists in a single special movie, so he's easy to watch. Sky Rider, meanwhile, I've heard Sky Rider's alright, but the fact it's a complete reboot of Kamen Rider, only 10 years into the history of Kamen Rider, makes it feel like less of a reboot and more of a half-hearted do-over, especially since it drops its reboot status halfway through the series, to course correct and connect to the Golden Age Showa series anyway after all. So finally we have Super 1. Now Super 1 doesn't have that much going on for him. He's one of the more robotic riders, possibly the most robotic rider so far. He's got more gizmos than your usual Kamen Rider, but his costume is very bland looking. Just looks like a generic silver Kamen Rider with like some Elvis tassels. Now the thing is, while typically you find people saying good things about literally every single rider show, I've never found too many people who will like soapbox for Super 1. So I just start off thinking of Super 1 with this basic understanding that Super 1 is the worst Showa rider. Maybe he's not the weakest, maybe he's not the strongest, but at the very least he's the least popular Showa rider. I assumed it was just because of bad timing on his part, maybe the character was too obscure, maybe it was a bad season since it was the last Kamen Rider series produced for 7 years, until Black did a hard reboot. But as it turns out, there's actually something else going on there, something way more sinister that I'm only just learning about. Now, while Tetsuro Kurata did a couple of shitty things over the course of the pandemic to ruin his career, Shinsuke Takasugi, on the other hand, had a much more dramatic and much more profound fall from grace, committing a much deeper and darker list of crimes that we're going to go over today. And this can of worms goes fully unsolved mysteries in the end, in a way I really wasn't prepared for, but I'm going to deal with it because that's my job. Now, let's talk about this bastard, Takasugi Shunsuke. By the way, that's not his real name. His real name is Naoki Iwata. And I know it's typical for actors to change their name to a stage name, but what annoys me about Takasugi Shunsuke is he never fully settled on exactly how to spell his fake name. So it's been a real pain in the ass to research him because there's at least 2 popular spellings of his name and 1 unpopular spelling of the name. Oh, and also I really need to give a shout out right now to Takasugi Shinsuke, a fictional antagonist from the first couple of seasons of Gintama, who committed fictional crimes and had an extremely similar name to Takasugi Shunsuke. His existence made researching this one a complete kick in the balls, and I just hate him now by default. Someone once said that only the good die young, and if that's true, then all old people are bastards, because it's that old cliche that if you don't die young as a hero, you live long enough to become the bad guy. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right up the bat that at the end of this story, it turns out that Takasugi Shunsuke is a compulsive liar, and he's really good at making up bogus stories on the spot and playing them to his advantage for, gain. Now, you need to consider that as I go over his biography, because there's some really weird shit in his biography, and I have almost no way of verifying a lot of this weird shit, but I'm letting you guys know now that some of this stuff is suspicious, and some of this stuff is weird, and this guy is a proven liar, and I was not able to verify everything he says he did. So anyway, let's discuss Takasugi Shunsuke. Once upon a time, Takasugi Shunsuke was just a young man who only wanted to be a singer. Unfortunately, unable to find a lucrative way to do that for money, out of high school with no career prospects, he decided to join the Japanese Self-Defense Force, which is basically like Japan's army. It's where you go if you don't have any career prospects and you need an easy job. Especially since Japan doesn't fight in any wars, it's a really easy job. Now, supposedly he had a decent grasp of English, and after that he was accepted as a transfer student into the US Ground Army Special Forces. And then if the stories from there are true, he enlisted for 1 year in the Super Elite Green Beret program, and as a young man in his 20s, he served a 6-month tour of duty during the final years of the Vietnam War, making him potentially one of the only full Japanese citizens to fight in the Vietnam War. And then as the story goes, during the Vietnam War, he encountered another Japanese citizen Green Beret who thought Takasugi could make it as an actor. So upon returning to Tokyo in the 1970s, he decided to again pursue his passion to become a singer. But he wasn't good at it. He failed, and he decided with no other career prospects to pursue acting. Now, he was childhood friends with a semi-famous comedian named Ryutaro Kamioka, who helped him get booked to a few places, and at this point he officially changes his name to Takasugi Shunsuke. Now, at first he only gets booked on gig extra and stunt jobs, and eventually he gets his first breakout role in 1978 in a film called Never Give Up, where Takasugi plays a renegade soldier on a rampage. Now, Takasugi was originally booked on the film to do stunts and to be a military realism expert because he was a Vietnam veteran, and he excelled in that role, and he established himself as an actor from this one movie. But it is a little bit weird that the character he portrays in the movie and the story about himself being a Vietnam veteran sync up just perfectly well. Now, part of me kind of thinks that possibly this character was based on his true experiences, but it could also be the opposite of that, and maybe he's lying about his experience in Vietnam, taking on the qualities of a fictional character he portrayed in a movie. This is something he would later do in his manipulations to the Kamen Rider fanbase, so I just have a little bit of a suspicion on that, and I have no way of verifying if he did actually fight in the Vietnam War or not. Anyway, so after that, he kept doing bit acting parts, and he actively lobbied himself to get on Kamen Rider because he wanted to be Kamen Rider. Apparently, he was actually able to win over Shinomari Shotaro with his military background, his high physical fitness, and his general respectability as a role model. And somehow by the time they were ready to make Kamen Rider Super 1, he was the guy they picked. Now, after Shinsuke gets picked to be Kamen Rider Super 1, we have our first recorded instance of Shinsuke telling a major lie about something major in his life. Now, while there was no evidence that Shinsuke lied his way to get the role of Super 1, typically Kamen Rider actors have always been actors in their mid-20s because of the physical strain from the stunts. But Shinsuke is one of the few exceptions to the rule. In 1980, when Kamen Rider Super 1 was filmed, Shinsuke was 31. Now, no one ever called out this fact at the time, but knowing that now that he was born in 1949, you can easily figure out that he lied about his age just by doing the math. Now, this is another discrepancy that you can disregard by just chalking it up to a simple mistake, or perhaps this lie was told on the studio's part to make him look like a younger man. However, this is another discrepancy that fits in with his later behavior of being a compulsive liar. So after that, emboldened from getting the role of Super 1, he used his main character power to somehow force himself into becoming the singer for the opening and closing of Super 1. I guess he really argued for it and no one said no to him, but I'm completely sorry, this dude is not a good singer. He's just not cut out for it. He just sings like a completely average dude, and I guess it's like the clear difference between I like singing and I am a professional singer. If you check out the opening to Kamen Rider Super 1, the backup choir Kurogi 73 does all the work, and this guy is definitely no Ichiro Mizuki. Now, the end credit theme is a little bit stronger, but I have to chalk that up to that just being a better and catchier song. It's the song where there's an entire line of lyrics that are just like A, and then the hook to the song is A. You'll know the song if you've heard it. It's the one with way too many A's. A. Anyway, Super 1 unfortunately did not do good as a Kamen Rider show. It did worse in ratings compared to Sky Rider, and although some people love it, a lot of people have mixed feelings about it because it's like the last Showa Rider that feels like a Showa Rider. It ran for 1 year, and then there was no Kamen Rider again for 7 years until Black did a hard rebooted series. Now, after the fact, Shinsuke stayed on very good terms with his Kamen Rider fanbase, and also the other Kamen Rider actors. He had an interesting quirk to him that he didn't drink, so he got nicknamed the designated driver of the Kamen Riders and would often drive their home when they got together for like a meeting. Takasugi had a great reputation anyway, and spent the next 30 years living his life, making movies, making songs, and fighting around the world. Unfortunately, as he aged, he stopped being able to book consistent acting work by the end of the 1990s. He still stayed busy with frequent cameos, radios, and talk show appearances, and he even did a voice in the Shin-Chan 3DS game that I've never heard of until now, which I guess is based on a running gag where he appeared as a teacher in an episode that year. His last major film contributions were again as a military guidance counselor for the last two movies in the 1990s Gamma trilogy. While researching this video, I checked out his website. His website is a super weird time capsule. It's been operating since 2003 with very few updates. However, the last post was from 2016, about a week before his expose incident. Most of the posts on the website, though, are from 2010, so I think he fell out of using it for a while. From the website, it seems like he spent the last 6 years of his life working basically non-stop, either doing public appearances of non-significant variety, minor interviews, and minor live-action superhero shows, which would pop up as around Japan, basically he was on tour. Ironically, he did have a single son, and his son went on to become a music producer, and did help legitimize himself as a singer, or at least his son helped him book gigs. You did it. You achieved your dreams through reverse nepotism, the goal of all parents. Anyway, at this point, I suppose I should start getting to his dark side now. We often hear of toxic fandoms, but Takasugi Shunsuke is the opposite that. He was the most toxic part of his fandom, and his fandom is virtually worse off for it. In a pretty dramatic stretch of time from 2004 until 2012, Shinsuke started telling problems to various people he would meet that he was having very extreme financial problems, and he fully expected his fans, his friends, or literally anyone who would talk to him to bail him out. This all culminated in April 8, 2016, when Japanese TV channel TV Asahi dropped a shocking TV expose fully detailing the crimes of Takasugi Shunsuke. Making things worse was the fact that the TV expose totaled up his deeds and figured out that Takasugi had extorted 50 million yens from his fans, in American terms, relatively $500,000, about as much money as you need to buy a house. Now, I originally thought that Takasugi had achieved this by scamming hundreds of fans, but it actually seems that he primarily got a large sum of the money from 5 ultra-rich whale fans that he preyed on in particular over and over and over again. Takasugi mostly preyed on older women who lacked romantic prospects and who respected him as a superhero. A lot of these women were older than him, but a few of them were also 20 years younger than him. The report covers up the age and the names of the women involved to protect them, but you can kind of take a good guess at the ballpark of their ages based on, they give you like silhouettes and whatever. Now, I was able to obtain a full transcript of the TV Asahi documentary, and if you guys want, I can fully summarize it for you later. Like, if this video gets like over 1,000 hits, maybe I'll do another video where I sum that one up, because there's a lot of detail about the crimes he committed and how he committed them. But for now, just keeping it short, Takasugi would start off and basically continue these innocent correspondences with his fans. But then after a certain amount of time, he would go off the rails into a state of lying about numerous insane things. At first, these would be normal things, like he would be incapable of paying his bills, he would not have the money for the rent, he would be on the verge of being evicted. But then as time would go on, he would make up more crazy lies, like he was having a divorce, he had children he had to feed, which weren't real, he had to get an abortion for children that weren't real. And lastly, a lot of stories circled around the topic that he was deeply in debt to a Yakuza loan shark who was actively trying to kill him, but never did. Or did he? A recurring lie Takasugi told was that he had a gambling problem and he had completely fucked up and taken out a loan from a Yakuza loan shark. And when he didn't repay the loan to the loan shark, the Yakuza had come to his house and taken several of his possessions, including his original Kamen Rider Super 1 belt. So he really wanted to pay back the Yakuza and get back his stuff, and a lot of people believed the story, even though it was kinda goofy. Look, these claims are really difficult to prove because you just don't know when it comes to the Yakuza. The Yakuza are antisocial, anti-everything. So it is actually possible that there is some truth to them, even if they do sound ridiculous. Like, boo-hoo, they stole his Kamen Rider belt. But considering where the story eventually goes, I don't think you guys should write the Yakuza off right away. Anyway, after the TV Asahi report, Takasugi was suddenly being sued by 5 different people in 5 different prefectures, plus a class action lawsuit by several more fans who joined together because he just ripped off so many of his fans. The Asahi report also brought to light that he had been making death threats against a woman who he borrowed over $200,000 from, and that he had also attempted to run down his former manager with a car when his manager tried to confront him about the situation. With these new facts suddenly coming to light, Takasugi was now considered scum in the public eye and was basically a criminal for all things considered. It seemed like the walls were closing in on him, with constant reporters hounding him and his failure to appear in court, eventually leading to an arrest warrant being issued for him. Right before this happened, he made one final TV appearance addressing the scandal and promising he would pay everyone back, and he made some efforts to pay everyone back, but all he really paid back was 2 of the people who loaned him over $200,000. He gave them both $50. Anyway, when the world needed him most to get their money back from him, Takasugi Shunsuke finally vanished. In 2017, at the age of 68, Takasugi Shunsuke vanished without a trace and was never heard from again. If Takasugi is still alive, he would have turned 73 this year. Here are some digitally aged up photos of him where he might be bald or he might have let his hair grow out. Now, while most YouTubers would stop the story here, I am not most YouTubers. I'm going to take the story forward one extra step and speculate on the fate of Takasugi Shunsuke, because there's only a few scenarios for what happened to him, and they're pretty dramatic. Scenario 1. The fugitive Takasugi Shunsuke. In the most likely scenario, Takasugi Shunsuke is still alive, but he has fled Japan. Takasugi Shunsuke was fully able to speak English, and the general thought is that he used his ability to speak English to flee to another country. He could have gotten on a boat, used his manipulation tactics, and taken a boat from Japan to South Korea. In South Korea, he could have easily got fake papers from the Korean mafia there, and then taken a plane to literally any country in the world with a fake passport. His Green Beret background was his last bankable talent that was useful overseas, and he still could have monetized that in the United States, passing himself off as a veteran, and then going low profile and just going into retirement as a veteran. He also could have gone full survival man and gone off the grid, but if he is alive and surviving, I think it's very likely that he could be living in a major city like Los Angeles or Honolulu, someplace with a large enough Asian population that he wouldn't stick out too much and he wouldn't be identified. Just one small enough that no one would recognize him as Kamen Rider Super 1. So if you guys ever see an old guy who looks like this, maybe you should think twice about who he is, because it's possible that a random old Japanese man living in your city is the fugitive Takasugi Shunsuke. You should definitely inform your local authorities if you see him, or maybe take him out for karaoke, because apparently he can't resist doing that. Fugitive scenario number 2. Takasugi is hiding in Japan. So this is a possibility, but I would say it's unlikely, especially after the TV Asahi investigation. People were actively looking at him. So if he did stay in Japan, he would have had to hide someplace really well. Now, it is true that Shinsuke was a nationalist, and he had a nothing beats Japan attitude, so it is possible that his patriotism was enough to make him not flee the country. If this scenario is true, I would expect him to be in one of the less traversed prefectures, living under a fake name and alias, trying to avoid detection, probably not going outside much. I would say this scenario is very unlikely, honestly. However, there is one odd clue to suggest its possibility. Even though Shinsuke is a fugitive, someone is still paying fees for his official website to this current day, and while it is possible that his website is being kept up by a diehard fan, since the site hasn't been updated since Takasugi's disappearance, the fact someone is still paying for it at all is a little bit suspicious. It's also possible that since Takasugi did specialize in manipulating his fans, it's possible that he could have convinced a few of his diehard fans into hiding him from the cops, maybe even helping him forge a new identity, or stealing one from a deceased relative. There have definitely been cases where senior citizens have stolen identities from other senior citizens in Japan, so it is possible that Takasugi is hiding in Japan committing Social Security's fraud. Fugitive scenario number 3, the outdoorsman scenario. So this scenario kind of overlaps scenarios 1 and scenario 2 in that it's the sequel to both of them. In this scenario, basically Shinsuke uses his Green Beret training and completely goes off the grid and lives in the woods. Now this actually happens more commonly when you think, especially with fugitive from justice cases like this one. And there's actually numerous cases where this has happened in the USA and Russia, especially Russia since Russia has a very high number of fugitives. What's funny is that everyone who lives out grid can seemingly only manage it for about 20 to 30 years before they fuck up and something fails. Many of these outdoorsmen eventually resort to committing crimes to keep themselves alive, and this eventually leads to their capture by Great Society, and if not, then they eventually die of starvation or illness. Now, I'm not ruling out that he did or he didn't, but if he did, I think something would have gotten him by now. I think a bear would have eaten him by now, because if he's still alive, he'd be close to 73, which is way above the typical age of survival for these outdoorsmen. Now, it has only been a few years since he vanished, so who knows, but I really think if he tried this, he would have died doing this. And finally, that brings us to scenario 4. Scenario 4 is that Takasugi Shunsuke is dead. Now, this unfortunately is the most likely scenario, because if the 73-year-old Takasugi Shunsuke is not laying low, or living with a fake ID in like California or Vancouver, then most likely the reason for that is because he's been caught and he is dead. Now, first of all, when you consider all the scenarios I just presented, it's very easy for one of these scenarios to take a wrong turn and Takasugi dies as a fugitive. Maybe his boat sinks while he's fleeing the country, maybe a bear eats him, maybe he gets mugged by a stranger. Hell, maybe he made it all the way to LA and he died as an illegal immigrant in Skid Row. A lot of illegal immigrants die in Skid Row. He could be one of those John Does who turn up in a gutter every day. Through his own incompetence or the incompetence of others, the man just might simply be gone. I don't think Takasugi Shunsuke would ever commit suicide. I don't think he has the right mindset for it. And I think if he had, he would have done it already. On top of that, I think if Takasugi Shunsuke did commit suicide, I think we would have found his body by now. So for all those reasons, I think he might be dead, but I think he might not have committed suicide. I think there is one grim final scenario. This is my most likely scenario for what happened to Takasugi Shunsuke. And this is what I'm going to call the boy who cried wolf scenario. Although in this case, it's more like the old man who cried Yakuza. Considering Takasugi's 15-year downfall contained numerous unverified stories of his dealing with the Yakuza, and how he became entangled with them from a series of badly intended gambling mistakes, and further stories of the Yakuza breaking into his house, stealing his possessions, and threatening his life on the regular. Now, everyone wants to play this off as a bullshitter saying more bullshit. And yeah, it's easy to say that to make yourself feel better, but stop for a second and consider, what if that was all true? What if between Takasugi's shady business practices, his strange web of obscure connections, and his general bad ability to manage money, what if Takasugi Shunsuke did get involved with a shady loan shark or something like that, and found himself in too deep, in too fast, and maybe he wasn't just on the run from the law when he disappeared, but on the run from lawbreakers? I don't know this guy, but I know he wore out his welcome. But if his story was, I owe gangsters a large sum of money, and if I don't pay it, they're going to kill me, and then it turns out he didn't pay it, and then it turns out he was never heard from again, the logistical thing to assume here is that the Yakuza caught him and they murdered him. Takasugi can be quoted in his last days as saying that if the Yakuza ever caught up to him, he'd be dead at the bottom of Tokyo Bay in a week. So with that, my final conclusions on this case are that even though there is a 40% chance Takasugi Shunsuke is living as a fugitive in America or Taiwan or some other backwater village, there is a 60% chance that Takasugi Shunsuke is wearing a pair of cement shoes at the bottom of Tokyo Bay. So I think that's the way it rounds out. He might be in heaven with Jimmy Hoffa, he might be on the run from the law, or he might be in hell being eaten by bears. I will be really surprised if we ever get a clear and final answer to this story, because that would require him being found dead or alive, and for now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is where it ends. Nonetheless, Interpol is still trying to find Takasugi Shunsuke, even if they aren't actively looking for him at the moment. So that's the story of Takasugi Shunsuke, the Kamen Rider who had the greatest downfall, going from a TV superhero to a real-life criminal. At least so far. Maybe there'll be another Kamen Rider who will fuck up worse than this, but I really don't think he can fuck up worse than this. He extorted over $500,000 from his fans, and regardless of whether he's a fugitive or dead, he lost his life for it. So if there's a lesson here, it's that never let anyone borrow money from you. You're not a fucking bank. Don't trust anyone with your money, because as Takasugi Shunsuke found out, if you can't manage your own money, you're doomed. Alright, I was Buster Green, and once again, you guys, if you want more information about Takasugi Shunsuke, if this video does well enough, I will consider doing a second video on the crimes of Takasugi Shunsuke based on the transcript from the TV Asi documentary, which I do have on me. Alright, thank you guys. Later, leave a comment. Thanks. Oh, and watch my stuff for 1 hour, because I need 922 watch hours to get monetized. Alright, thanks. Subscribe. Later.